Kids are heading back to school, summer's come to a close. That means it's time to stop and rank all 36 summer 2021 movies I saw, from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your picks for the best and the worst movies of summer 2021. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. We got a lot of movies to cover, so let's get started. Dishonorably coming in last place is The Forever Purge. This is a franchise entry that feels like it completely forgot what made the concept of the Purge interesting in the first place. There potentially could have been some fun with all the chaos and carnage taking place, but the movie puts its social commentary so front and center without actually having anything to say that it sucks all the fun out of the movie. I didn't enjoy it at all. Number 35, Above Suspicion, a film about a real-life event that's actually pretty interesting, but they picked the wrong direction, the wrong angle to tackle this story, and they tried to present it as kind of this forbidden love story that goes wrong, and it just doesn't feel like it was the right way to handle something so tragic that actually happened, and it just kind of leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth when you realize where exactly they're going with this, and there's no one to root for, there's no one to care about, so it just didn't work for me. Next up, The Woman in the Window, a thriller clearly inspired by The Rear View Window that doesn't have much new to offer the genre. It's got a great cast. There is kind of an idea in there about what if someone struggling with some mental illness witnessed a crime, how would that play out? But by the time you get to the end of this movie, all of it rings hollow, and it doesn't feel like they had a good story to tell. They just thought they had a clever twist, and in the end, it wasn't all that clever. Number 33, Infinite, a sci-fi action thriller that borrows from every classic sci-fi action film or spy thriller from the last 25 years, throws them into blender, mixes them all up, and the mix does not taste good.
Not impressed.
This pretty clearly feels like a movie that they tried to rework in the editing room so it was focused more on Mark Wahlberg, so they sidelined a bunch of their great cast, and it just felt like we were jumping around, cutting through a bunch of different plot points without any of it coming together, even though I think there might have been a good movie here, but this isn't it. Then we have Old, the latest high-concept M. Night Shyamalan thriller. This one has a fun concept about people stuck on a beach that are rapidly aging. There is some great body horror thrown in the mix, but it doesn't feel like it adds up to anything by the time you get to the end. It tries to do a big twist ending, but it just ends up answering questions that we weren't asking, and it just makes the whole thing feel kind of meaningless, and the whole thing is also filled with incredibly awkward performances. Number 31, Fear Street 1666. This was a frustrating one for me because on the one hand, I thought it did bring the Fear Street trilogy to a satisfying conclusion with the final twists, reveals, and answers to questions, but as a movie itself, it's totally inconsistent with both the previous two entries in the series as well as with itself. As soon as it goes back in time to the 1660s, it just totally does not jive with the rest of the franchise, even though the same actors are playing different people, so I just don't think it came together as a film in and of itself, even though it did land the ship of the trilogy pretty well. Bringing us into the top 30, Spirit Untamed. This is a children's movie that's good enough as a children's movie, but doesn't have a whole lot new to offer. It's a pretty familiar plot line about a father and daughter who have been separated, that don't understand one another, and throughout the course of the journey, they earn each other's respect and build a relationship. It's fine. If my kids wanted to rewatch it, I wouldn't mind, but it doesn't have much to offer me personally. Next up, Snake Eyes, a generic ninja Yakuza movie pretending to be a G.I. Joe origin story, and in doing so, I think they shot themselves in the foot because this lead character makes so many bad choices that make him unheroic and totally unlike the character that we know from G.I. Joe, that it just sabotages the entire movie. And I think this could have worked better as just a standalone little generic ninja flick. Number 28, Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. Now, these movies are intentionally designed to just showcase a bunch of charismatic, likable movie stars having fun on screen, doing ridiculous things. And this movie does that well enough, but I just don't think it had enough to offer beyond that. Sure, everyone here is oozing charisma, but the plot about Ryan Reynolds going to a therapist and giving up on being an assassin, all that stuff, it just felt so goofy, so corny, that it even cheapened the basic concept at hand. And so, it's watchable enough, but I don't feel like they did anything interesting with it. Then we have Fear Street 1994, the first entry in the Fear Street trilogy. And when I first watched it, I was kind of lukewarm on it, and I liked it a good bit more once I watched the next two films. And after finishing the trilogy, it kind of solidified in my mind that I think Fear Street would have worked a lot better as a 6-part miniseries rather than as a trilogy of films. There's a lot of nods and homages to horror films from the 90s that I absolutely loved. There's some cool sequences, it's some gnarly kills, but overall it also has this weird thing where they're trying to adapt books for tweens, but making it R-rated, and so the whole thing feels like R-rated content for teenagers, which is just kind of a weird mix. And so while I enjoyed some of it, I think it was also a very odd experience. Number 26, Space Jam Legacy. Now, this is probably my kids' favorite movie of the summer and the movie that they've rewatched the most on HBO Max over the last 30 days. As for me, it's a movie that delivers quite a bit of entertainment value simply by having an enormous amount of novelty, by throwing so many little cameos, references to things at the screen, that it puts a little grin on your face. But the actual script itself, I just don't even understand some of the decisions they made, because it takes 30 minutes before Bugs Bunny shows up, and we spend an awful lot of time with LeBron James and his family at home talking about all their family drama, when what I really want to see is a basketball player with the Looney Tunes. Number 25, Those Who Wish Me Dead. A good enough little thriller about Angelina Jolie trying to keep a child alive while being chased by two assassins, as well as a big gigantic forest fire. This one feels very much like a throwback movie that could have come out in 1998. In fact, a movie just like this did come out in 1998 starring Howie Long. Here I am! I like those kind of movies. I enjoyed the experience of watching it. These are very consumable for me, but it's also a very forgettable film because it just feels like something that we've seen many times before, this time just with the novelty of it being Angelina Jolie. And it's a little bit disappointing in light of the writer-director of the film, who's delivered some high-caliber thrillers. Next up, Jolt. This is not a good movie, but it is a fun movie. It's a high-concept action thriller with Kate Beckinsale beating people up for the entire runtime. It's a ridiculous concept. The screenwriters couldn't seem to decide if they wanted to go with this rom-com direction with the concept, an action revenge thriller, or this complex spy world of secret agencies. So it just kind of throws all of it into the mix, and it's only 90 minutes long. If you have a low tolerance for schlocky action flicks, just skip this one entirely. But if you kind of like that sort of thing, like me, you might have fun with it. Moving along to The Ice Road. Now, this is the latest Liam Neeson action thriller, but the thing that caught my attention about it is that it was written and directed by Jonathan Hensley, who back 20 years ago was kind of like a top screenwriter. He directed the Punisher movie with Thomas Jane, and he just hasn't done a lot in the last 15 years, so I was curious what his return film would be, and it's a good enough Liam Neeson action thriller, slightly different, a little bit character, more complexities to them. There's some nice touches here and there with Liam Neeson's relationship with his brother, but fairly standard thriller, conspiracy, trying to survive story. Number 22, Cruella. Now, this is a movie that was tough for me to decide where to place because on the one hand, there is a lot of artistic flares to it. The direction is handled nicely. The production design looks gorgeous. Of course, Emma Stone is great in everything she's in, and so she's a ton of fun in this movie. But at its core, I don't think the concept works. The idea of taking Cruella and trying to reframe her as this misunderstood punk rock outcast tearing down the man.
Some things should work, but do they?
I just don't want to see a puppy killer presented in that light. And so the whole movie, it's like, okay, this is well done execution of a not so great concept that I don't think you could ever win me over with. Number 21, Fear Street 1978. Easily my favorite entry in the Fear Street trilogy. A nice homage to the classic slasher flicks that I grew up watching late at night after my mom went to bed, and I'd check out all these Jason Voorhees films on TBS and TNT. It finds a way to feel like them while being different enough, expanding on the mythology, and in doing so, making the first film a little bit better. Has characters you care about a little bit more than you usually care about characters in slashers like this. As with the rest of Fear Street, I once again I don't know that it works entirely as a standalone film, and it would have worked better as a miniseries, but easily the one that delivered the most stuff that I enjoyed about these films. We've made it to the top 20 with Gunpowder Milkshake, a highly stylized, energetic, female-led action thriller with no shortage of world building and fun characters. I don't know that all the pieces of the story work entirely for me. I think it overcooks some of the world building, trying too hard to be clever, but it was a fun time, and if they do another one of these, I'd enjoy checking it out. Next up, Green Knight. Now, this is a movie that's difficult for me to review and rank because I admired it more than I enjoyed it. This is not a movie designed for me. I like stories that are literal, plot-based, action-based, and this is the opposite of it. It is cinematic poetry with beautiful imagery, exploring deep, complex themes with multiple interpretations. That is not my thing, so I can appreciate they did what they were going for, while at the same time being like, that's not a movie I would just choose to rewatch on my own. Number 18, Spiral from the Book of Saw. The latest film in the Saw franchise I thought was a nice little return to form by making it a bit more character-based, following this detective, doing this investigation. Thought that was the right direction to go with the franchise. There were some nasty, memorable kills inside of it. You know, it's not the best entry in the franchise. It's not the best horror movie of the year. But for me, I thought it was the right way to bring this franchise back. Then we have Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. This is a movie I wish I could have higher up on this list, but Mr. Snyder just made a few too many odd choices with the film. At its core, the idea of Zack Snyder doing a zombie heist movie in Vegas sounds great to me. It's got an awesome cast. Of course, the zombie carnage is amazing. Zack Snyder's great at that sort of thing. There's just too many moving parts in the plot line that don't quite add up, and some choices that I think just undermined any satisfaction that I could have in the third act of the film.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
And so a movie that I really wanted to like more than I actually did, while still enjoying a great bit of the film. Number 16, Batman The Long Halloween Part 1. This is the first half of a two-part adaptation of the much acclaimed graphic novel, The Long Halloween, into animated form. Being that it's based off one of the best Batman graphic novels of all time, it's telling a great Batman story. It's got a wonderful voice cast throughout it. And if you don't know, The Long Halloween was one of the big influences on The Dark Knight. And so you can see a lot of similarities and sequences as you watch this. I think some of the pacing is a little bit off, both as the overall flow of the story, as well as individual scenes can play out a little bit long. There's a little bit too many pauses between certain lines of dialogue, but in general, a very solid Batman story. Next up, Don't Breathe 2. I wasn't quite sure how it would work taking the blind man and putting him front and center in one of these films, but I don't know. I really dug this film. It's absolutely B-movie schlock. If you try and dissect some of the plot lines, like, wait, how would a blind man be able to do this? How would he get there? How would he find that? You can poke holes in this entire story, and I can understand why there's certainly going to be a group of people that would just find this movie off-putting because of who the lead character is. As for me, I just love these types of home invasion films, revenge stories, and I feel like they did address the fact that He's not a good man. The movie never portrays him that way. In many points in time, you're not fully rooting for him. You're rooting for the girl to survive. Number 14, Luca, the latest Pixar film, tells a charming coming-of-age story about two creatures from the sea who head off into the city and form friendships, bonds, and try and discover what they're passionate about. The story's a little bit familiar. It touches on some beats that we've seen many times before, but it does all of it in a fun fashion with characters that you enjoy and that you're rooting for. Then we have Jungle Cruise, a big, gigantic adventure that borrows heavily from Raiders of the Lost Ark, Romancing the Stone, The Mummy, and Pirates of the Caribbean, but that doesn't mean it's not a lot of fun. The big thing that pulls it all together are the two leads. Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt have great chemistry. They're great on their own. Put them together on a fun adventure, and you as the audience have a lot of fun. Number 12, In the Heights. Now, I personally am not someone that, generally speaking, is into musicals, but at the end of the day, this was a great, uplifting story about a community coming together. And while they do face obstacles, they do have conflicts that can pull people apart. It's about people that actually care about one another. It's not cynical. Add to that, there's some amazing musical numbers, some great dance sequences, and this is the movie that my wife has been rewatching on loop ever since it debuted on HBO Max, or at least until it dropped off HBO Max, and then she started asking me, when does it come out on Blu-ray? I want to go buy that so I can start rewatching it on loop again. Number 11, F9, the biggest and dumbest movie of the summer, but as for me, I had a good time with it. I call these Taco Bell movies. They are cinematic fast food. They're not good for you, but that doesn't mean you don't enjoy gobbling them up. I totally get it. If for you, this movie went too far, it's too stupid, cars can't drive in space. You're right. You're not wrong, but we all have that stupid thing that we enjoy because it's stupid. For me, it's these Fast and the Furious movies, and I had a gigantic grin on my face as Roman discovered that he was indestructible, as cars started driving through space, and magnets started pulling things back and forth in a manner that does not line up with the laws of physics. Kicking off our top 10 is Fatherhood, the Kevin Hart-led dramedy about a man who wasn't really ready to be a father, who immediately becomes a single dad, and the journey of him trying to raise his daughter. It can be funny, it can be heartwarming, and as someone that has 3 children under the age of 10, there's all these relatable moments all throughout the film. I wish it came to a more satisfying conclusion at the end of the film, but overall, a film that I thoroughly enjoyed and pulled a bunch of emotions out of me. Number 9, Wrath of Man. The latest team up between Jason Statham and Guy Ritchie ignores Guy Ritchie's usual tone and sense of humor and tells a fairly straightforward story, but its mix of revenge and heist stuff worked for me. Likewise, while it is a fairly straight narrative, it's told in a non-linear, chapter-based fashion that withholds information from the audience in just the right ways to give just the right reveals to kind of tell this emotional journey in an interesting way. So for me, it goes in some familiar territory, but it does it really well. Number 8, Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. The third main Conjuring film changes up the formula, makes it more of an investigation, adds some human bad actors into the mix that are working against the Warrens. For me, it was the right direction to take these characters. Certainly, I think the movie would have been better if James Wan had been directing it. He's just very good with these types of films. But I thought this movie worked and did something just different enough with the franchise and the characters that I had a good time with it. Number 7, Black Widow. The long-lost MCU Phase 3 film certainly feels like it's coming out 5 years too late, but that doesn't mean it's not an enjoyable film. In particular, Yelena and Red Guardian put a big, gigantic grin on my face. I liked kind of this spy story that had stakes because you cared about the characters rather than someone trying to blow up the city or a world. And so, for the most part, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. Certainly gets a little cartoonish in the third act. I wish they hadn't done that, but still a good time. Next up, Free Guy, Ryan Reynolds' video game movie that's not based off of an actual video game, turned out to be a remarkably sweet and heartfelt film. It has this uplifting message about discovering your purpose. It has multiple romances going on, and because it's set in a video game world, it allows for a bunch of insane, wild, and wacky things to take place. And all throughout, there's some nice cameos and usage of the licensing agreements that the movie was able to get because Disney acquired Fox. So all in all, a really nice movie to close out the summer. In fifth place, Till Death. Now, this was one of the most pleasant surprises of the summer for me. It's a simple concept survival film starring Megan Fox, and it absolutely worked for me. It sucked me in, kept me on the edge of my seat from beginning to end. Part of what probably helped is that I didn't watch the trailer before I watched the film. I also love these sorts of home invasion survival type stories, but this one took a simple concept and found all the right ways to add conflict, and as soon as one idea was starting to get stretched a bit thin, it would have to throw some twist turn into the mix and move to something else. There's not a lot of moving parts, but all of them fit together nicely, and I really enjoyed this film. In fourth place, The Tomorrow War, a movie that turned out to be a lot more divisive than I was expecting. Obviously, I loved it. My wife, she loved it too, and I went on the internet, and opinions are all over the place, from one of the worst of the year, mediocre but entertaining, and a bunch of other people that loved it like me. So I love time travel, time loop type stories. I love alien invasion stories. It had all the ingredients that I liked, but the thing that kind of elevated for me was all the family relationships and dynamics that added an emotional punch for it. For me, the story about second chances, redemption, and forgiveness, all of it worked for me while having Chris Pratt with a machine gun shooting aliens, so I loved it. Real quick, before I give you my top three, remember to join me down below in the comments section. Share your picks for the best and the worst of summer 2021. Also, if I missed anything that you think I'd enjoy, let me know down below in the comment section. Bringing us into the top three, The Suicide Squad, a project that only happened because James Gunn was fired by Disney, and it turned out to be the perfect project for him. He's so good at working with these ensembles of weird characters and making them relatable, funny, and each of them stand out while being heartfelt at the same time. Add to that the fact that he was allowed to go wild and crazy with the R rating leans perfectly into his actual comedic sentiments and the way that he tells jokes. So this was a match made in heaven and a very enjoyable time at the movies for me. Our runner-up, Pig. Nicolas Cage stars in John Wick with a pig, minus all of the action and focusing in on the shady underground world of Portland restaurants. It really does have a plot and setup that is reminiscent of John Wick and also has the world building of John Wick, but it absolutely is not an action movie. It's a little bit tough to explain what makes this movie so captivating because it's such an unusual concept for a film, but it tells its story with such utter sincerity. It's this melancholy journey about what drives us and what makes for our true passions and having something that you really believe in. Even though it has this unusual, strange exterior, it's a very emotional, powerful film at the same time, and a movie that I absolutely loved, weirdness and all. But my pick for the best movie of summer 2021 is A Quiet Place Part 2. This is a great companion to the original film that tells a bigger story, expands the world without losing what made the original so good. And I think that's at the core of what made this movie work for me, is that it's in this dire, devastated world, but it manages to still be optimistic and not cynical. The other thing that elevated this movie is that it separated the characters, but used intercutting to build tension in each of their stories parallel to one another and paid them off in ways that worked so well. So I loved the original, and I loved this one just as much, so it comes in at number 1. Remember to share your picks for the best and worst of summer 2021 and any recommendations for movies that I missed this summer. Also, if you enjoyed this video, check out that video right over there. I don't even know what YouTube's recommending to you right now. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.